Something which has never occurred since time immemorial. A young woman did not fart in her husband's lap. Welcome to Bite Marks, everyone. And if I'm making a fart joke, then you know what time it is. We're doing an episode with R.M. Brown, the left's probably greatest comedian. Say hello, R.M.
Hi, thank you. And that's definitely true. I am the greatest.
Or maybe you're the only one. I'm Emilio Singh. You know me. Pronouns he, him. RM.
Hi, Emilio. I'm Ryan. It's nice talking to you today. Thank you for having me. And I'm a he. I go by he too. He, him.
Just a couple of hymns on this podcast.
Yeah. Couple hymns.
I think your channel does deserve more subscribers. So probably for many of the people who might not know who you are, why don't you tell us and the audience a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do on YouTube?
Yeah, I do like a daily YouTube show where I pick usually somebody to make fun of. Lately, it's been kind of YouTube right-wingers, and I kind of make fun of them. I do some light criticizing, some critical analysis, as I call it. But as we were talking about earlier, it's kind of absurd. It's a little bit silly, and I also do a live show that, for some reason, we barely talk about anything political on the live show. It's usually pop culture stuff and movie stuff and stuff like that. So that's what I do. Every day there's something, and every week there's 2 live streams. So that's pretty much what I'm doing on there.
Yeah, the reason why I wanted to have you on, because today's topic is something that I'm quite passionate about, namely cruelty and comedy, talking about Carolla and Crowder. I didn't workshop that one at all, guys.
Nailed it.
It got it in one. And the reason why I wanted to bring on R.M. Brown is that I think that in the leftist sphere, broadly speaking, there are kind of like two kinds of channels on YouTube and maybe Twitch. There's debate bros, so people like Vosh, Hassan. Some people might consider Destiny. I think he's on the fence. And those guys are, they try to be funny sometimes, but they also get into the blood sporty kind of thing. And then you've got lots of people who do video essays. I'm personally a believer that every kind of content has its space. But something that is missing, I think, from the left, especially if you consider the right, is comedy. And your channel, I think, is quite unique in the sense that you do criticism, you do come in with the dunks. But you're really funny, drops. But your channel is fundamentally about humor and using humor as a vehicle to, express ideology, as a certain raccoon man might say. Is that an accurate, summation of what it is that you do?
Yeah, I think that's pretty close. I mean, like, the stuff that I make fun of is itself pretty absurd. So I think pretty much the only way to approach it is absurd comedy and sort of being silly. But yeah, I think I think you got it pretty accurately right there.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Albert Camus. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Apologies to all of the French people in the audience. But I like absurdism. And, sometimes when you're looking at a character like Ben Shapiro, who is a muppet of a man, and he's, seething at he's frothing at the mouth about, the plight of the Palestinian people, in a way that is kind of absurd. Here you've got this guy who's pretending to still be a boy genius, who is got like a multi-million-dollar TV show or YouTube show, and he's just foaming. He's just foaming with rage. And it's this strange thing that is just, I don't know if it's really easy to convey, but you see what I'm saying? Like, there's this weird absurdist nature that sort of runs through a lot of these right-wing people, and I think comedy is a good way to deal with that, because a lot of people in the left are very self-serious, if I can say. I think there is a tendency in the left where everyone is too serious at times about what it is that they're trying to do and what it is that they're talking about. That's maybe just my own opinion. Don't cancel me on Twitter. No, I don't actually have a Twitter.
No, I think that's true, and yeah, it is. The thing with I mean, I get a lot of views when I upload something about Ben Shapiro, obviously, because I think that's another thing that's absurd is that those guys are still pretty popular on YouTube, so it's just kind of to me it almost feels like how have more people not moved past this yet, but so that's part of the absurd nature to it, but I think you're right. It's just like it's just so it's just so silly that I think you have to have some fun with it, and I think yeah, you're right. Like there's a lot of seriousness on YouTube about stuff that I think, at least to me, is so dumb that it's funny.
Yeah, yeah. We exist in a civilization. We are in this weird society that produces these strange outcomes. And I think it's sometimes quite important to be able to laugh at these things. And, that's why I think channels like yours are important, because we need that kind of thing. So to bring us into the topic, I think that comedy is a fundamental part of the human experience. The world's oldest joke is a Sumerian fart joke from like 1900 BC. And I think it's true that humans have always been telling jokes. But really, the modern era is different in the sense that comedy really is an industry. We've got the comedian industrial pipeline, so to speak, where, we have these really massive comedians who have huge reach. And it doesn't come as a surprise to me that a lot of comedy is a vehicle for, again, as Slavoj Žižek would say, ideology. I'm sorry, I can't do his accent.
Yes, this is how it works. The comedy, this is they shove the ideology into the comedy. Yes, sorry, I got carried away there.
Yeah, Slavoj Žižek's spirit possessed you temporarily to get that one out there.
Exactly.
I don't think it's a far cry to say that there are ideological comedians, especially on the right. And I think that it's important to sort of dissect this kind of trend if we're going to try to understand what it is that we can do about it. Broadly speaking, from what I can see, there are kind of two ways that you can make comedy. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you're more of the expert than I am. I think there are two fists of comedy, and one of those fists is punching down, and one of those fists is punching up. And basically, a lot of comedy has to be directed at someone. And if you're punching down, well, you're targeting someone who has maybe less social standing or less power. And if you're punching up, you're doing the opposite. Obviously we can draw a tradition to things like court jesters and stuff like that. The crazy guys who would, do a song and dance routine, make fun of the king. In maybe the more modern era, you might point to someone like George Carlin. Because he was like, a lot of his comedy was like, this American society is really weird and strange. What are we doing? Point to it and like be worried about it. And then, it would be the joke. But comedy definitely goes the other way around as well. For anyone who has been a kid in any kind of school ever, you've probably seen, some other kid get bullied and picked on, unfortunately. And what's happening? You've got a bunch of kids, and they'll all gather around that one guy or girl or pal and pick on them. They will laugh at them. They will use comedy as a tool to otherize that one person, single them out. And when cruelty and ideology collide, you get people like Steven Crowder and Adam Carolla. And I know those are two people that you, especially Adam Carolla, that you cover on your show. So what are your thoughts? Like, do you think that it is true to say that comedy is ideological nowadays? Or was it always ideological?
Yeah, I think that it depends. There's some comedy, like for example, that's like less ideal, that has less ideology in it, like somebody like Todd Barry, or like, I don't know, maybe even like a little bit of like Eugene Merman, or like some of them, but it's still there. I think like guys like Steven Crowder and Adam Carolla are like, yeah, it's definitely ideology, but it's it's very thinly veiled,
Mm.
you know, like it's almost like it's just like out there, you know, especially with Steven Crowder. Like, I'm not sure how anybody could find that funny, but like you were saying with like punching up versus punching down, I think that's like definitely the deal with somebody like Steven Crowder calling himself a comedian, because you know, I've watched large parts of that show, and he does this kind of like, I think he kind of wants it to look like a late night show, like you know, David Letterman or Jimmy Kimmel or whatever. And it's all just sort of like from the point of view of like an oligarch, basically. It's like poor people suck, you know, rich people shouldn't have to pay taxes, immigrants are bad, anybody who's non-white is bad, anybody who's like, you know, it's all that. So it's like, and I think that kind of tells you something about comedy too, that it's sort of like, you can, there's a solidarity, I guess, not to use like a buzzword, but there's a solidarity aspect to good comedy where it's kind of, you at least get the feeling that you're kind of like in something together. Like, I don't know how anybody would get any of that from Crowder. It's pretty bizarre, actually.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Crowder is definitely the bigger of the two fish. You know,
yeah.
if you had to ask me, I think Adam Carolla is a star that is already dead, and he doesn't know it, and he's just and he's just coasting down the hill with his foot on the clutch, and it's like, yeah, his career, he's not going to be known, you know, in a couple of years, unless he goes off the deep end.
I don't think he's going to be remembered. And I didn't know this, but I think his podcast actually still gets pretty good numbers. I think he's up toward the top of the podcast downloads. I could be wrong on that, but I looked it up, and it looks like he's pretty high up.
Yeah,
there.
According to what I looked at, he's like the 50th most listened to podcast, which is insane.
Yikes! Yeah, I don't know how.
Yeah,
why? I mean, it's weird because podcasting too is a very parasocial relationship thing, and I think he really got in there early, and he was like uploading podcasts a lot, and they were very long. And I think a lot of people just sort of, similar thing with Dave Ramsey. I've made fun of Dave Ramsey, who is sort of like a fake financial guru guy. He got in early on the podcasting game too, and I think there's that parasocial element to it where I think people just get attached. It almost like feels like a friend or something, and I think a lot of people have that with Carolla too.
Yeah,
weirdly.
Yeah, I think like a lot of YouTube celebrities, not to throw any shade at people, because obviously I think many of them work hard, but I feel like a lot of people who are big in YouTube nowadays wouldn't be able to get big, you know, had they started today. It's really a product of like getting in on the ground floor, establishing a brand, establishing a name, the regularity, you know, like people listen to Rush Limbaugh for some god awful reason. And there's nothing special about him. Like, that's the weird thing about it. Maybe he was a vitriolic crazy person, but he's not like good at doing that, you know?
Yeah, I think that was probably an example of an early parasocial thing because, you know, it's sort of like, you know, there's a little bit of difference between that kind of broadcasting and doing a podcast, but they both have like an element of intimacy to them, especially like when you're listening to something, it's kind of like right in your ear holes, you know, it's very like something very intimate about it. And I think probably that's why a lot of people got attached to Rush Limbaugh. So
yeah, I mean, if you just want to listen to, you know, Rush Limbaugh, you can go to a barbecue with your conservative uncle and just listen to him for like an hour. You don't have to, you know, subscribe to a radio channel.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And now those same uncles are probably listening to Ben Shapiro and you know, whoever, probably Crowder. I mean, Crowder's YouTube views are I can't believe they're still that high. You know, they're out of control.
We'll get to Crowder. Don't worry. He's definitely a different fish. But I think for me, Carolla is what makes him so strange is that I've tried to look into, you know, what does he consider himself to be, and according to Carolla, in his own words, he's a libertarian. So you know, in the only way possible that Americans can make it. He's a libertarian in the sense that he's completely against all state welfare, and he's also for the legalization of weed. So, like, yeah, he's a firm believer in freedom. The freedom to starve, the freedom to die because you can't afford your insulin, and also to, smoke a doink. I believe that's the expression. That's what the kids say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's also like his freedom to hire people to work for very low wages for him too. I think like that's probably a big part of freedom in Adam Carolla's view, and his freedom to take money from like Dennis Prager's thing and all that stuff.
Yeah, Adam Carolla's freedom to keep trying to get his dumb TV pilots made. Oh boy, he's had so many shows that have been canceled. It's like he'll pitch this pilot, and the plot of he's just a dad who has a weird job. He's got like a wife and 2 kids. It's the suburbs. It's it's insane to me that he keeps pitching these things, and he keeps thinking, oh yeah, this is the comedy that's gonna totally blow open the comedy scene. Literally every other comedy that's ever been done, since the 90s. And
Adam Carolla is, I think, like, yeah, he's the reason I think that he's never made it like with a sitcom or something like that. At least like the Kevin James he probably wants to do like a Kevin James King of Queens kind of thing. The problem is that he's just not funny enough, and he's not a leading man at all. Like, he can't do it. I think like you actually made a really interesting point with comedy being the ideology of comedy. It's funny because like Adam Carolla is almost like entirely ideology, because like he doesn't really even do jokes, and his ideology is basically like this what I think people are attracted to is basically like this libertarian fantasy of that you're going to work your way to the top as an individual, and he's basically like an old school like hustle YouTuber or something. Like, yeah, he really hits the whole like blue collar working guy thing hard. Definitely in his case is completely phony. Like, he hasn't had a real job in 30 years, and he's telling other people that they need to work hard. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, him and Dave Rubin really go on the whole like you have to go serve me at the restaurant that I don't like going to, but I go there because it's expensive kind of energy.
Exactly.
Something that I've noticed that I think is kind of interesting about Adam Carolla, and he was on Tucker Carlson, which is Tucker Carlson, noted friend of democracy and freedom and liberty.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'll have to talk about Tucker Carlson another day. That guy is single-handedly just gonna destroy the American democracy just for like money. It's such a mundane, like, at least Sauron wanted to like rule Middle Earth. Tucker Carlson is just a fail son who inherited a bunch of money, and now he pretends to be confused when people call him out on his racism. But anyway,
that's the thing. That's the thing. Maybe like I'm missing something about Tucker Carlson is like he could kind of just do whatever he wants. Like he doesn't have to do what he does. It seems like he chooses to do what he does, and like that's makes him even weirder. Like Dave Rubin seems like a guy who would never be able to really make it on YouTube, or like, you know what I mean? Like he or eventually his numbers would start to go down or whatever. He definitely wouldn't be able to sustain a high paying career or whatever. But so he's, now he's like just like totally going rightward. But I feel like Tucker Carlson could have just kind of like taken his inheritance or whatever and like disappeared or something.
Yeah, the most annoying thing about the rich, like mega rich, is that they don't shut up about just, like, if I were to tell you, Aram, you're gonna have like $1 billion tomorrow, I would never see you again. You would just disappear into the, Wile E. Coyote style, leave a pile of like dollar bills just, floating in the wind, because
fluttering in the wind.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, because it's like, why, for someone who's had to be, a working class person or, to struggle, the idea that you would have all this money and then just use it in like the weird, like just go sit in front of a camera and like sprout off weird, boomer, talking points. It's very strange behavior because maybe this whole thing is kind of just like it's a weird ideological brain poisoning. But anyway,
yeah, and it's very also like it's very boring. Like I was watching because I gotta watch I watch all this stuff to make fun of, and a lot of the times like I'm watching like a longer Ben Shapiro video, and a lot of that stuff he seems really checked out.
Yeah,
like he's literally just like going down the talking point list, and it's how does that not? I mean, it's almost like I get that feeling of like alienated like factory work or whatever, where it's like he's just like going down the thing that the people who pay him the whatever oil billionaire pays him to say. He's like going down the list. It's pretty. I don't know. It's pretty boring. I would say
you kind of get the sense that people like Ben Shapiro, Adam Carolla, and they want to be like the next. They want to be like the next Richard Pryor or George. They want to be like doing stuff, writing scripts and making movies, and even Adam Sandler has a more successful career than a lot of these people in Hollywood. It's like a part of it is just like that's what they could do because they weren't good enough. Like the meritocracy decided you just weren't funny, so you got thrown out, and now you do this. But to circle it back, Adam Carolla said something that I thought was really interesting, and you probably covered this on your show. He said, cancel culture is destroying free speech and killing comedy. And that to me is like, whoa, comedy, like a tradition that is almost as old as human civilization. We've got jokes that are like thousands of years old, and Carolla's like, this is it. Cancel culture, that's the end of comedy. That's going to kill it. It's not going to be able to survive. We got to all move to the right so that we can no, that's a very grandiose kind of claim. And I was thinking about it a little bit, like why would he think that? And my perspective is that Adam Carolla is just stuck in the past, right? Adam Carolla was making jokes, and he makes a lot of these like jokes against LGBT people, but the joke is that that person is gay, that's icky, we should all laugh at that. And like that's like humor from way back when. Many people alive today can probably remember when it was like calling someone gay or calling something gay was just the funny joke to make fun of it, right? Even though that's not funny, there's no joke actually there. It's just a thing is a thing, laugh. And I feel like Carolla in particular, he was able to build a career to some degree of success, not like a huge degree, but to some degree of success, of making those kinds of jokes at a time when society was like, yeah, this is fun. We'll just make an Ace Ventura movie where the joke is we're gonna make fun of a trans woman. That's the joke, And society has moved on, thank goodness, and it's left him behind. And Adam Carolla's like, well, hang on, guys, these jokes were funny. It's like the Seymour meme where it's like, could it be that I'm the person whose views haven't evolved with time? No, it's everyone else that's wrong. Cancel culture is destroying society. It's destroying comedy. I can't be funny anymore because my jokes, are too PC. But it's like, well, hang on, what are the jokes? And then you start to unpack it, and it's like, oh yeah, so you were never actually funny. Society was just more cruel. Like that's kind of the, and that's why I don't think that Adam Carolla will have a lot of staying power, because that kind of comedy really is completely unsustainable. It's completely unsustainable because, like it or not, these rubes, like it or not, but like society will move and it will like leave those values behind. Like in 15 or 10 years time, or hopefully sooner, you won't be able to make a joke that is trans person icky, because trans people will be hopefully way more normalized. And then Adam Carolla will still be there, be a geriatric old man tied to his chair trying to still make the same old jokes. I like that's my read of his comedy, that he's a relic essentially. That's why I called him a star who's already dead. He just doesn't know it yet.
It's weird because, and also like, it's not impossible for comedians to evolve, like Patton Oswalt is one of my favorite comedians still, and if you look at some of his older stuff, it was maybe a little bit more, some of it's outdated now, but he's like, the thing is that like he's like intellectually curious, and he's like he's not like stuck, like you were saying Adam Carolla is. And it's funny that this guy Adam Carolla, like, I mean, him specific, not that like he's like this big culture maker or anything, but like it's funny that he presents himself and that people kind of buy this image that he's selling as like the working, like hardworking. I'm the hardworking guy, and oh, if you do hard work, that's what's important. He doesn't seem to be willing to do the work, the quote unquote work of like learning. You know, like he's not learning. Like he's stuck in a world that's, I feel like, is pretty easy for someone who doesn't have a real job like him to figure this stuff out, you know, but he's too lazy to do it, you know. I think that's part of it. And yeah, I mean, and you're right. I think part of it is also just that there's a lack of intellectual curiosity or intellectual ability or something there, you know.
I don't know. If I was incredibly wealthy and like I had a career of just like phoning it in, and I feel like that would rot my brain. My brain would be mush at that point. So like on the one hand, maybe he just doesn't have the ability to, you know, really meaningfully like look inside himself and be like, am I actually funny? Are these jokes actually good? Are my scripts, you know, like I don't. One part, maybe he just doesn't have that ability, but another part is maybe he had that ability and he just, you know, lost it. But I do like what you said about Patton Oswalt, because I am familiar with some of his comedy, you know, and I do think that there are plenty of people who have evolved, right? There are, because I'm not one of those, you know, you've done a bad thing, therefore you're always bad. I don't like that kind of tendency in the left. I think it's always important to encourage people to evolve, to become better people, and to, you know, look upon their earlier selves as like, yeah, that was cringe. You know, I don't want to be like that anymore. I've learned. And I think a lot of comedians today, maybe, the ones that will really have like, you know, longevity will be the ones who will continuously evolve with the times. Because comedy has a life cycle. Some of it ages better than others, but it has a life cycle. You know, what's funny today not be funny, you know, in a couple of years' time, or even in, you know, in a month. Social media makes everything just like speed up incredibly quickly. So,
Totally. Yep.
And you know, of course, speaking of social media, I think we have to talk about Steven Crowder. So, if Carolla is like a like busted up, I guess a Carolla, he's a busted up Carolla that's like chugging down the hill. You know, he still thinks he's like you know, like it's the 2000s and, you know, everyone wants a Toyota. But Crowder is, I think, a lot more dangerous. And I think he's by far and away a symbol of something new, something a lot more frightful. But, you know, before we get into it, I just wanted to hit you with a factoid that I didn't know. So did you know that Crowder's wife is named Hillary?
Oh my God. Wow. I bet he's really mad about that.
Yeah, you know, for someone
I did not know that.
For someone who's foaming about like Democrats all the time, and you know he was foaming about Hillary Clinton. It's like, it's weird to me that he would marry a woman named Hillary, because that's like that's maybe a sign of things to come. So, also, you know, for those of you who might not know, Steven Crowder is like, he's got a Canadian citizenship. I think he was born in the U.S. I think he was born in Michigan, but he lives in Canada. So that's like a long list of like former Americans or Canadians who are just like making America worse. You know, like there's Stefan Molyneux, Lauren Southern, Jordan Peterson, all these crazy Canadians who are just like, you know, coming over the border and just like making everything worse.
I know. What is going on with that? Weird. They're getting rid of them. That's why Canada's so polite. They just send them down here.
Yeah, they export the crazy.
Exactly.
So, you know, before I give you my perspective of Steven Crowder, what is your perspective of Steven Crowder? Because you've covered quite a lot of his stuff. Not as much as, you know, Ben Shapiro, but definitely quite a bit.
Yeah, like I've watched a lot of it, and I get the impression that I don't know, but actually I watched. I used to work in this office where there was a guy who watched a lot of that kind of stuff.
Oh no!
You know, he would watch Steven Crowder. He would get PragerU ads, and he would watch PragerU. Yeah. And I think that's really like sort of distracted younger guys or like, I probably all age range guys, I think is like that's who might gravitate toward Crowder. I think like a lot of the stuff he says like seems easy to understand, and it seems like there's like it's reactionary stuff, and if you're kind of like vaguely angry and sort of pissed off, like Steven Crowder's probably attractive to certain males because like, or certain anybody, I guess, because
Yeah, let's be real. Ladies aren't really watching that kind of show.
I can't. Yeah, I would love to see the demographics on that. I would be shocked if there's like a large female Steven Crowder fan base.
I would be shocked if it was like 1%, honestly.
But yeah, if it's anywhere near 1%, I would be absolutely shocked.
But I do know that a lot of Crowder's audience tends to lean young, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I think the thing about Crowder that sort of like instantly contrasts them, the reason why I picked Carolla and Crowder is not just because their names will go great on the thumbnail, I mean, not on the title, but Crowder has largely been on the periphery of the mainstream, media, of the mainstream entertainment. He had, from what I could tell of his career, he didn't really get even half of the mainstream success that even someone as terrible as Adam Carolla managed to get. He had a couple of, I think he was in a couple of movies, he did some voice acting work, and he was on Fox News. And he didn't actually get big until he got on YouTube, right? Which instantly tells me that there's something fundamentally different between what Crowder is trying to do and what Carolla is trying to do, Because like, I was talking, to my partner, and they had no idea who Adam Carolla even was, right? But they know who Steven Crowder is because they've seen the "Change My Mind" meme.
Right, exactly, yep.
And Crowder's style, if you could even call it that, is a product of the internet. Number one, he tries to carefully crouch his words. He tries to dog whistle carefully because he doesn't want to get banned because he loves money, and I'll talk about that in a second. Mm-hmm. But I think the way what he tries to do actually reminds me a lot of like, were you on like internet forums? Did you play a lot of like FPS games back in the day, and join those like Call of Duty lobbies and those kinds of things?
I mean, I definitely we were talking about, I think before we started, we were talking about like early internet, because neither of us is internet native. I used to go in more like chat rooms, like old school chat rooms, but
IRCs,
that,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, IRCs. I kind of wish they would bring those back, but
I know there was something kind of exciting about that, right?
There used to be so much optimism about like the internet, and now it's just like confused screaming and like terror about what it. This is truly a dark age.
Exactly. I think that's maybe something that we like maybe experience that a lot of people not younger than us, is that there was that optimism toward the internet of like, wow, like look at the freedom, and you can just go and talk to people in these weird chats, and but now it's more like there's a real skepticism about like the internet and a sort of it's interesting. I mean, I think it's totally changed.
In a way, to draw a parallel, or maybe an analogy, I feel like people who are not internet native, older people, they're like the first apes that were like finding one of the monoliths from like 2001, and we're like, we found it in the woods, and we don't know what it is, and it's terrifying, and it's scary, and then like anyone who is internet native has always known that the monolith has existed. Right, like that's
right.
That's like the perfect sort of parallel. Like imagine like us, we were apes in the forest. It's like, this thing is scary. What do we do? But then also look at the possibilities. Stone shiny, all that kind of stuff. And then it's like a kid who's like a little gorilla or chimpanzee. It's like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. We've always had the monolith. It's always been there. You guys just they have a different frame of perspective on it. And it's like, the internet is a scary place. It's
exactly. Well, to continue the 2001 metaphor, maybe they're the baby floating in space.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Who knows?
Oh, it's been a while since I've seen 2001, but it wouldn't surprise me if like they were the baby. Well, no, actually.
Or maybe they're, or I wonder who's Hal in this? Who's Hal?
Dennis Prager.
Who's the
Definitely Dennis Prager.
Yeah, maybe Prager. Yeah. Maybe it's Carolla.
I could see, like a Dennis Prager AI that's just like old and like racist and just the worst person you could imagine.
Oh my god!
Like, in the future, there's like a future Denny's, and there's like a black person shows up, it's like, hey, can I get a table? And like, sorry, I can't do that. My fellow African American.
I'm afraid I can't do that.
Yeah, Dennis Prager, or maybe it is Dennis Prager. He's uploaded his brain, because he's just got all that money.
Oh man!
So to go back to an earlier analogy, to go back to what it is that Steven Crowder is doing. From my perspective, I don't actually think he's there to tell jokes. I think what he's there to do is to normalize cruelty. Right, because like I said, Steven Crowder's audience, I think, is actually kind of young. I think it skews a little bit more towards the younger range, because when you're a kid and your parents like, don't say those words, they're bad words, and then you like go onto Google and you find the people like using swear words or whatever, you laugh, right? Because it's your parents are telling you that you can't do a thing, and you derive a satisfaction from being rebellious. I think what Crowder does is that Crowder is an outlet for that worst, most negative impulse, the desire to transgress in a way, and he takes that desire and he uses it to normalize cruelty in his audience. Why else would he have this weird hate boner for someone like Greta Thunberg? Oh, I mean, he used to get funding from the Coke industries. Apparently, he doesn't anymore. But it's because he's trying to normalize the idea that caring about the environment is a bad thing. That a cool person doesn't do that. A cool person just allows them to build a power plant in your, a coal plant in your town and like just spew coal dust into the air. It's this weird desire to normalize, cruelty that I think Crowder is, because here's the thing, and I want you to, be honest. I think that deep down, Steven Crowder wanted to be a comedian. I think I've seen some of his skits, where he did the fake George Floyd murder recreation, and like he just half-assed it. But I feel like Steven Crowder wanted to be funny. He wanted to be a comedian. He wanted to do all of those things. And then he tried it and he just got thrown out. He just got chewed up and spat out and kicked out of Hollywood, And then he realized, okay, well, if I can't make people laugh, maybe I can be the one who's, starting the bullying. Maybe instead of telling a funny joke that gets everyone laughing, I can point out one kid and make us all laugh at him. And that's when, because the right wing, they're always looking, they always got the money. The left wing does not, guys. If you have any delusions that most left wing creators are being funded by someone, please disabuse yourself of that. We are absolutely not being funded by anyone. But then people realize that, hey, Crowder is a useful tool, right? Because what he's doing is he's using comedy as actually just a tool of ideology. He's just telling people jokes that are, the whole punchline is, be cruel to this person, don't think about it, just be cruel, it's okay, you're cool because you're doing it, don't be like those SJWs or whatever. It's like, guys, come on, that's my read of Crowder. Do you have a different read?
No, yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. There's definitely a tragic element to him, and I think not even just from knowing his story, but if you watch that show, which I've watched, hours of it.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, exactly. Yeah, there's definitely a tragic element to it. Even just watching the show, you could tell something's kind of off there. And yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a good read that he sort of, and probably he was I think a lot of comedians have this where they don't kind of get into the in group or the cool group. So they kind of freak out and become reactionary or just exhibit all this weird behavior. There could be a little bit of that. I think there's also probably a lot of financial incentive for him. I know that there's a real, look, if like you were saying that there's a lot of funding on that side, if you just search like Ben Shapiro or search like some right-wing name, like a bunch of ads will come up immediately on YouTube. So they are constantly running ads. I mean, another example is like somebody who became a meme a couple years ago, Ben Shapiro's sister, Abby Shapiro. I used to get ads for her like every other day. Like they pump tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars into YouTube ads. So it's a little bit easier for them to basically become celebrities, or the small version of celebrity, which would be social media influencer. So that's like an option. And I feel like just Steven Crowder, like he's just one of those guys who like really took that. But now it's like, I mean, and also that I will say the show is pretty well produced, and that goes a long way on YouTube too, I think, because people just say, oh, this is a real show, and they start watching that. I think there's a little bit of that too.
Yeah.
But you're definitely right with the cruelty thing too. I mean, it's like, and that really serves it. That doesn't just serve him. I think that serves basically like not having any progress just in general, because it's like, I mean, that just having a more cruel sort of and really like low self-esteem society, it like serves not having a functioning healthcare system, not housing and all that stuff, being like, well, look, if you can't afford to live in a city where everybody's getting pushed out, like that's F you, that's your fault. If you have a bunch of student debt, whatever, you made a mistake, like F you, that's your, it serves all that too. So, I think you're right. I think that definitely, and cruelty almost seems like, I mean, that's exactly the right word, but it almost seems like a little like misleading. It's more like, to me, it's, I guess I'm looking at it maybe even from a more like, or like a little bit of, I'm trying to look at it from a more Marxist perspective of like, this serves somebody, like this, like what he's doing and what these guys are saying, and why, like we were talking about, Carolla is a phony baloney, a guy who's pretending to be like a hardworking man who's been living in Hollywood and not doing real work for 30 years. All that serves somebody, and it serves sort of the status quo. It serves non-progress, I think.
Yeah. Something that I think stands out to me about Steven Crowder is, are you familiar with Blair White?
Yeah, I know who that is.
The unfortunate, terrible trans woman who, unfortunately, her whole shtick is making fun of other trans people to feel accepted. Now, I think Blair White does that because she has a pathological sort of self-hatred, and number one, there's money in it. There's always money on the right wing, guys. We have to talk about like the right wing media pipeline, because a lot of people seem to think that just because, you can make a video that's dunking on Ben Shapiro, that we're winning in some sense. We kind of, yes and no. Like, yeah, young people tend to be better able to differentiate nonsense. But on the other hand, no, because we keep like not making any political gains. It's like, yeah, trans people are becoming more accepted, but like anti-trans legislation keeps getting passed, so it's like, it's a kind of a wash on that front. But I think Blair White does those things because she has a pathological desire to feel accepted. And when I think about Steven Crowder, I think that a part of what he does is, a desire to be accepted. What he wants is acceptance, I think, a validation, really, as a comedian, as an entertainer. And he's just not funny, right? He's just actually not funny. So the only people who are going to validate him are people who think he has the right words, or people who think that he's saying the right thing, i.e., Rube's on the right.
Yeah.
And, like, to go back to what you said, there is a purpose to what he's doing. He's a mouthpiece, right? But I think even if there is a sort of ideological or structural reason for why he's doing the thing that he's doing, I still think there's a personal reason for why he's doing that. And I think it is, why doesn't he want to, like, why did his dad tell him not to debate Sam Seder? Because his dad knew correctly that Sam Seder would destroy him. Sam Seder would destroy Steven Crowder in a debate. And that would, Crowder's vulnerability, his credibility would just be thrown out, because he only debates unprepared people who are college kids.
Exactly. Yeah, that's totally true. Yep. He's trying to. Yeah, you're right. There is like an internal side to this where the Sam Cedar thing is he probably doesn't want to puncture like this bubble that he lives in too. I mean, I wouldn't want to either. Like, I'm trying to have a little bit of empathy here and think like if I were in his position, like I'm doing this right wing stuff. Like if you do it, it's very easy also to like do some research and figure out that what he's saying in a lot of cases just straight up doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they lie a lot.
So yeah, they straight up just lie. I mean, and there's like really, really big contradictions in a lot of the stuff. Like I did one where he's talking about Ilhan Omar and he's like going right down the basic right wing talking point that Ilhan Omar is just a straight up Jew hating anti-Semite, and like it's sort of like, look, if you compare that to any of your other stuff about like cancel culture and all that, it's just too big of a contradiction for you to like make any sense out of it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of like, look, he's probably making a lot of money. He's getting 1 million views on every video. Like he could convince himself that he's a success according to, our whatever American society version of success. Imagine puncturing that. Imagining looking outside of that would be very, very uncomfortable. And like a lot of people who, have build some wealth in a shady and shitty way, like do this. They protect themselves from seeing that what they're doing is, a net negative, And he's probably that's probably why he's not, wouldn't want to debate Sam Cedar, or if he would, it would be, he would have to figure out some psychological mechanism for defending himself and all that stuff. It's the same with Change My Mind. The Change My Mind thing is a trick. The whole thing is a carnival trick. I mean, if you have every talking point prepared and then somebody steps up and they don't even know the topic, it's literally, a carnival trick.
Yeah, you're stacking the deck. It's funny that... Yep, sorry?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny that, like, Crowder is a puppet of the ideology, right? He is, like, a Sesame Street character who goes out and tells kids to, hate gay people. But Crowder is a victim of the same ideology that he espouses, right? Like, that's like the thing that, like, gets me, right? Because Crowder is... his obsession with success, his feelings of like inadequacy about his, the fact that he wasn't able to become a comedian, the fact that he can't risk damaging his brand, he can't risk puncturing the illusion. All of that stuff is just capitalist ideology. Like, I think sometimes we have this tendency to think like, yeah, the people who are like doing this stuff, the people who are like doing the terrible hate stuff, they're like a little bit smarter, a little bit like, more put together. But actually, Crowder's just, I don't really feel sympathy for him. But like Crowder is also a victim here, He's a victim of the same pipeline that he's helping to create. And that's just like that just blows my mind,
Also, we have to say, like, you tell me what you think of this, because I was thinking about some of the stuff we were talking about, like that we were exchanging in text and stuff. And like one of the shocking things about it is that anybody, like you were saying, it's weird that anybody watches Carolla, or that there's like would be even be a 1% female audience for Crowder. Sort of weird that anybody pays attention to him, much less he's one of the most popular political personalities in the country,
Yeah, he's one of the biggest online.
He's one of the biggest, yeah, for sure. And like I think part of what we have to like work into this little analysis is like the conditions under which that would be possible, and like why would so many people be attracted to this? Is it just the people behind Crowder and Crowder himself and the way that the internet works, or is it part of it that people don't have the resources to be able to spot this as a fraud, And I think that's like a more at least action oriented way to look at it, because then you could say like, okay, like clearly like we need to be fighting for a better conditions like in this country and in the world and stuff, because otherwise people just slip into this reactionary mode, probably partly because they're angry, partly because they don't have time to learn, partly because they don't have maybe educational resources, or everything's based around just making money, so you don't have critical thinking skills. Like, I think that's part of it too. I mean, that's a little bit more, it's a little bit bigger of a topic, but
yeah, no, maybe we can do another episode sometime about that. I totally agree. I think that we have to include a materialist analysis here. If the fascists in the country are gaining support, there has to be a reason for that, right? I think if we're on the left and we're like, oh yeah, these people are just always fascists, or they always were fascists, or there's some like, almost like the race realism, those people, those terrible people with their phony pseudoscience. I almost kind of think that sometimes the left does this like inherent evil, where someone is just like a switch just flips and they just become a fascist.
Yeah.
There's no like graduation process, really. You're either A or B. And I think in particular, one of the things that, just to touch on it briefly, one of the things that I think pipelines a lot of these kinds of people, a lot of this kind of comedy, is an awareness in society that there are problems. But I think the issue is that there doesn't seem to be any kind of system to be able to change them. Like, there was the George Floyd protests, the BLM, protests. And like, it felt, because I was looking on social media, and for a long period of time, lots of people were talking, even here in South Africa, where we have a even more, crazy police force. There's even more police violence in this country than there is in yours, in a lot of ways. And lots of people were talking about it. And it's like, oh yeah, lots of more people were starting to get awareness of this idea that there is a structural racism that is embedded into the police. And then, like, nothing happened. Like, there were some marginal changes here and there, but like nothing fundamentally changed with regards to the system. And I think that like there's kind of a double whammy here, because on the one hand, you have leftists, people on the left, who are like, we're trying to make people aware of these issues, but we have no power to change them. Not yet anyway. And so it sounds like, to someone on the right wing, it sounds like we're raising a fuss about nothing. Because, in their mind, they only ever think about power. So it's like, okay, we're talking about this issue, but we're not actually changing it. So it must not be, it must not be a real issue. It must be a fake issue that we're inventing, right? And, on the other hand, there is a tendency in the left to have this kind of, I think, maybe political defeatism. I think a lot of people who are woke scolds, and this is, maybe my contentious opinion, I feel like a lot of them don't think we can actually do anything about capitalism, that we can't actually do anything about structural racism or homophobia. Like, we can't do anything about it. Like, it's just going to exist. But the only thing that we can do is, like, get really angry at people on Twitter. And a lot of those people, like, the catalyst for a lot of this fascist movement was not, like, Steven Crowder releasing his version of Mein Kampf. It was Gamergate. It was guys on video game forums getting angry at the idea that a woman was doing something vaguely, in their space. And that was taken and they ran with it, right? It was this, it was this awareness of a social issue, but the inability to actually change that social issue that I think actually, is one of the reasons why these people, because like, what do people go to Crowder for? To get dunks of SJWs. They don't go to him for like ideology, really. To learn about, how to do a fascist organizing. They go to him for cruelty, for that catharsis of making fun of someone, of dunking on the SJWs, right? And then from Crowder, then they go to someone else. They will go to someone like Ben Shapiro, and he'll speak fast and he'll do his little song and dance routine, and they'll suddenly start thinking that Palestinian people aren't human beings, and then they'll go from Ben Shapiro to, Lord, I don't even know.
Who's next? Who's next in that pipeline? I don't know.
Who's next in the sewer?
Jeez.
Well, how funny would it be like at the end of that pipeline, it was like just like Dave Rubin.
Dave Rubin's the final boss in this situation.
He just blundered he just blundered his way into being like the final fascist, like, in the pipeline. Oh boy.
Looks at you with a blank stare.
I didn't even want to include Dave Rubin in this list because I don't really think he's just he's just all there. He's gonna come out as straight one of these days. He's gonna do a Milo, and then, like, that's all there is for these people. There's the endless grift. But we are almost running out of time.
Yeah, totally.
So there are a couple of things that we got to do. Firstly, I just want to once again, say that your channel, I think, is uniquely important in the left because you do comedy. And you do facts and dunks, yeah, but I think part of that appeal is the humor, and hopefully, you can continue to grow it. But I think maybe my question to you, my sort of closing question is there such a thing as too edgy of a joke? Like, do you think that even though we do generally probably agree that most of these people are not making jokes, they're just being cruel, do you think that there is actually maybe a line that could be crossed with, like, edgy humor?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that it, again, like, it depends on who's doing it, like the solidarity thing, I think, is very important. It's sort of like when you have a close friend, you can basically, like, no joke is too edgy, usually with, like, a really close friend, somebody who has your best interest and has devoted time and effort and resources into you. And also you understand that, if they're saying something that's edgy, that it's satire, because there's almost like a telepathy thing going on where, you know that person. So I think it's like, it depends on who's saying it. Steven Crowder and people like that, obviously, they don't have anybody's best interest in mind. So basically nothing that they say can be believed. So I think edginess is dependent on who's saying it and the context and all that. But I was talking to Ben Burgess about this on that interview, and he kind of was hinting at or making the point that comedy is art, and it can go to certain edges. I think when it comes to the point of really, like, legitimately punching down, like you were saying, that it's probably now you're like, now it's counterproductive. But in general, I think that all of this stuff works into that question, because it's also about sort of like what you were talking about, when you feel like you have no real power, you maybe want to police whatever you want to police what people are saying, instead of actually, because you think that real political change can happen. I think there's probably some of that, but in general, I think that we should know that it's art and be able to spot when somebody's being counterproductive, on purpose, or really believes what they're saying. If it seems like punching down. It's a little bit nuanced, but I think we also have to give people who are, have good intentions, give them the benefit of the doubt. So it's a little bit of a complicated question, but I think most people can, if they come at it in good faith, they can figure it out pretty easily.
I would tend to agree. I think art there's always going to be some element of art that is going to be transgressive. Oh, yeah. Right, and I think it's just a matter of trying to understand what is being transgressed against. Is someone just making a joke because they found a dumb tweet by an SJW, like one of those woke schools or whatever, and they're making fun of it? Or are they trying to signal that the idea that we should care, maybe about gay people or something like that, is the actual issue? And I think media literacy is, I think, the big issue, maybe more broadly in society. Because I talk about video games on my channel, and it seems like no gamers understand video games ever. Where it's like, there's a game, Call of Duty, and Reagan's like, depicted as a good figure, and it's like, oh, so you don't know how to read video games? Like, you just shoot the guys, and then you see the numbers go up. It's like, what was even the point of trying to tell you a story if you were just like BioShock? Oh my god.
I wanted to ask somebody about this. Is Reagan considered a good character in that game? Is he considered like a good guy?
He's definitely portrayed in a very positive light. He doesn't like... The characterization that I get is that Reagan is making like hard decisions because he's he's like a tough guy in a bad situation. He's got to do what's, to protect America. It's like, really, Reagan, really, you got to do what you have to protect America, or is it to protect, business interests?
Yeah, exactly.
BioShock is actually the big one that always frustrates me because no one seems to understand what BioShock is about. But anyway, I this was a good, I think a good episode. Consider Carolla and Crowder dunked on. There you go.
Dunk, guys.
Yeah, if I had drops, I would use them. I probably should have been using them, but I don't have drops. Why don't you shout out your channel and just shout out your socials while you're here?
Yeah, totally. It's RM Brown on YouTube. And yeah, again, I upload pretty much every day, and you can do the live streams on Monday and Wednesday. And I use Twitter occasionally. It's XRMBrownX2. And that's pretty much.
You couldn't get RM Brown, huh?
No, somebody took it.
Oh yeah, someone took bite marks on Twitter as well, so we have to go by bite marks cost.
Oh my god, it's you have some weird like little tacked on thing. I have that for so many of my social media things.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. I think your rule is like if you're doing a podcast, you have to like just have your name as the podcast. But like, I don't know. I feel like there would be so few limited names for podcasts if that were the case. Like Joe Rogan is lucky.
Yeah, exactly. I like the. I will say I like the name of your podcast. So
Thank you. Thank you. I really wanted to go with something that's punchy and appropriate because we talk about games, and maybe we'll have you on to talk about like comedy video games because those are a whole other kettle of fish. Trying to be funny in a video game is infinitely more difficult than trying to be funny in like any other medium, in my perspective.
Oh my god, yeah. I don't even know. I would not be able to do that.
Oh yeah, it's really quite something. So to round off, this has been Bite Marks. You can follow us. Please like, share, subscribe. Please share this video around. You can find us on wherever you listen to your podcasts. There is a link, a Curious Cat link in the description. We are trying to get questions for a 500 subscriber special. So please send us questions via that. That'll be really nice. Our Patreon is in the description. If you don't want to commit to a regular payment, that's perfectly fine. We also have a link to buy us a coffee. All of our socials are there. Shout at us on Twitter. Make fun of us on our subreddit. Join our Discord. We post memes occasionally. So this has been Bite Marks, and thank you again to RM Brown for doing this. This was a lot of fun.
No, pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and any last words?
If I had a drop if I could connect the drops, those would be my last words. I would say bye or flush a toilet or something.
I will edit in a flushing toilet at the end of this one. Okay, bye everyone, and wear your masks or take your vaccines.